Hi, everybody. This is Hari Subramanian, and with me, I have Gaurav Agarwal today. And Gaurav and I are thrilled to welcome you to the second open house of the DEPA model training. We are also calling this program DPI for AI. We are excited to bring this work that's been on for multiple years now to fruition and introduce you what DPI for AI is and what it can do for you. With that, we will get started. We wanted to start off and set a little bit of a backdrop of what DPI and or digital public infrastructure has done for India. Um, I'm not going to. There has been enough said and talked about the story of Rajni and how that inspired, India to build this digital public infrastructure stack. I'm not going to repeat that in this, but I would highly recommend that if you have not had a chance to familiarize yourself with the Rajni story and what inspired us to build the DPI for India, definitely we will link some of those in this open house. Please go watch them because I think that provides the necessary back context for this. But when it comes to DPI for the layers of digital public infrastructure, the bottommost layer is the flow of identity or flow of people. That's what got introduced with Aadhaar, and then with a slew of other services that built on top of Aadhaar, right? Like the likes of electronic KYC, e-signature, DigiLocker for a way for you to store these identity. That really helped a country of our nation scale. And I guess the most recent addition to that is DG Yatra, if you have actually traveled, taken a flight, right? All of these services are made possible by the flow of people. On top of that, we came up with the flow of money, primarily with UPI, the Unified Payments Interface, which acted as an open network for payments and collections. The BBPS, FASTag, the GST system itself, so many of these examples. And now we have ONDC, which is an e-commerce platform that actually builds on top of both the flow of people and the flow of money in order to actually bring an open electronics e-commerce marketplace to India. Now, as the last layer, and of course, the flow of information. There is a method to this layering, and Gaurav will talk about that in a little while. But account aggregator was the first innovation in the flow of information, which is the topmost layer of this DPI stack, where with the consent of a data principal, you're able to share information directly from one of the data fiduciaries that holds your data to somebody who's a data consumer, all electronically without signing, printing a piece of paper. And that is the first innovation in account aggregator, followed by OCEN, which is Open Credit Enablement Network, which leverages the flow of information to extend credit. And we are now going to talk about what are some of the upcoming innovations in this DPI stack, which will complete the stack itself and add some critical services for the flow of information. Gaurav,
Thanks,
anything
Hari.
that you would like to add?
Yeah, thanks, Hari. This is like, I look at this slide and it's fantastic. It's almost unimaginable how, our country used to operate literally 10, 12 years back. And it's interesting that the ordering of this, right? I mean, normally people go from top to down, bottom, but Hari went from bottom to up because, there's an ordering of this. Like if you can't identify or, certify identity of a person, you can't send money. And if you can't send money, I mean, what will account aggregator do, right? I mean, you can do the sort of sharing of information and other things online, but if the money cannot be transferred online, what's the point of doing all this? So I think there is a very deep thought that has gone into developing this stack over the past decade or so. And in a way, like what is missing right now is how do we take this further to enable India in some way or enable our enterprises to become a powerhouse, and we'll continue from here. Yeah,
makes sense. So now I think that this brings us to 2023, and just for context, this layered cake of the India's DPI stack was something that was sketched out in the back of an envelope nearly 10 years ago now. And it just happens to be an interesting year where 2023 is undeniably the year of AI and machine learning. With if today is the 7th of November, I don't know if you are all watching it, you would have probably caught up with the OpenAI announcements that was made on the 6th of November, right? With just advances and the speed with which the AI systems have been advancing and the amount of value they have been unlocking for their investors and the companies that are putting them out is just mind blowing, right? This information is a bit dated but still relevant, right? The top 5 of the 10 global largest companies or data companies, this area is dominated by big tech, significantly ad monetized, and largely if you look at the marketplace is the individuals and the smaller companies are actually clearly left out of this $15.7 trillion marketplace. And to add to this, where is AI? I mean, it's everywhere around us, right? Starting with social media, transportation, how financial services are delivered, how healthcare services actually innovation in that space is happening, and of course, e-commerce, which is very tied to advertising. Virtual assistants, ChatGPT being one of the most recent examples in that. ML models are everywhere, and ML models unlock the strongest value, right? They actually create the most value and they retain the most value in this ML economy. And it's just, there's no better time to talk about it than 2023. And Gaurav, I know you've been an ML practitioner for your life, so would love to get
so
your thoughts.
I'll just add to what Hari said here, I think, which will be a good segue into what we are going to talk about as part of DEPA training. And the thing is, like, what do we need to create these ML models, right? Because as Hari said, ML models are the sort of the most valuable part of this ML economy value chain. What do we need? We hear about these massive large models that are being created today. They obviously need a lot of compute. I mean, the large part is they are very large models, a lot of computations are needed, and hence you need a lot of compute, hence you need a lot of capital. That's something, given the growth trajectory of our country, I think we are on the right track with regard to that. What else do we need? We need data. I mean, there's no point having a very large network if you don't have a lot of data to train those networks. And while data is something, like, we are a very large country, like 1.4 plus billion people. So we obviously generate a lot of data. Everything we do around us and in digital world around us, I think we are generating a lot of data. But all that data is sitting somewhere. If it was in the right hands at the right places, and it was accessible to ML practitioners, then we will be sort of, you will be hearing about these new models coming out of India, but not quite, right? So just so that's why Hari said, like, this is very timely discussion, given data being one of the most important and most difficult at times ingredient to build these large models to do something useful and participate in this ML economy. Over to you, Hari.
Thanks, Gaurav. So that's a great introduction and an excellent segue to talking about data, right? Because we have now established how data and the richness of data is actually what makes these models happen. And the models is what unlocks the biggest value. So establishing that dependence, data becomes the most important thing. And like you said, India has some of the richest sources of data, probably the richest source of data in the world at this point, given our population and this rich population that is using digital services every day. Let's just take a moment to step back and understand the types of data, right? First one is what we call personal data. Personal data is typically PII, or personally identifiable information. Let's take this example of, let's say you're booking your train tickets in an IRCTC. As you key in the information that your name and age and all that information that is required to book a ticket, that is personally identifiable information. And the copy of that data that IRCTC gets from you can be called a golden copy of data, which is data that is generated in the IRCTC systems, and therefore it's a property of the company, of course, with the consent of the data principal who generated that information. That's the first type of data. And we'll talk about the implications of the data and what are we doing, what is DPI doing for addressing personal data sharing. The second type of data is called aggregate data. This is the less obvious yet the most valuable data for an AI and ML economy. Why is this the case? So now we talked about how the big tech companies actually have a ton of data. Let's think about why do they have the data? Right? Because they have created all these services and literally giving them out for free. That's your search, your social networks or your media sharing platforms. These are all content sharing platforms and consumption platforms where a ton of digital information and data is getting created. And that, when aggregated, creates so much information and patterns that could be generated from the data, which is hugely valuable information. These patterns are about what sort of customers come and visit these services, what sort of information, what customer is interested in, what is the demographic, what is the age patterns of these customers, and they become excellent information for an advertiser in order to then target and sell specific products. That's how this entire internet economy is powered and fueled today. And that's why these ML models, which are able to unearth these patterns, actually create great value, right? And that's not possible without aggregate data being generated with somebody. Now, a lot of this data, if you think about Google, it's just indexed the entire public data sets that are out there and then just monetize that, right? Now, we will look at what sort of data is out there and how can these aggregate data sets be unlocked in a way for India to benefit from. So we'll first talk about this personal data and how that is unlocked, right? So account aggregator, which is a consent-based data sharing mechanism, which is already in place today. There is over 15.65 million accounts who have given consent and shared data, their financial data through account aggregator. And that number is growing at a staggering 35% month over month. And there is a rich ecosystem of over 11 TSPs who are building to this DEPA protocol called the account aggregator. The use case in question here is how if you're a customer of a bank and you're applying for a loan to a different bank number 2, which is say the data consumer wants to be able to look at your bank statement from your primary bank. Earlier, you would have to go print a copy of it, get that copy attested, get it verified. All of that physical process, the time it takes, the money that it takes, is significantly reduced by a completely digital process through which the data principal can consent that the data provider directly share their bank account statement with the data consumer. And that seamless process unlocks the value of personal data. And with the introduction of the data, the DPDP bill, the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, there is a provision for this sort of a consent-based data sharing mechanism to be available for other areas outside of financial services itself. So that is a great way in which the digital public infrastructure in India unlocks this personal data. But the story is incomplete without talking about the modeling phase. So in this picture, this picture kind of completes that story, right? So let's say here, let's continue that example where with the consent, the data provider is actually submitting data to a data consumer. The user is actually directly getting the data to a data consumer. This is your bank statement bill. But then typically a lender runs this silver copy of data which was submitted to them, which is the bank statement, through a series of rules or an ML model, which is able to tell whether this customer is creditworthy. Now, how can that sort of an ML model be developed? These models today are largely a black box for most companies because you don't have enough aggregate data to train on these ML models. And so for instance, let's say a lender has a lot of previous data about loans that have been given out, the NPAs or the default rates of those loans, what sort of bank information or the account income or free cash flow from a user for those defaults. They have enough information to find patterns of potential users in the future who may or may not default. And an ML model could be trained in those patterns. And that ML model will be really good in predicting whether a new applicant is going to be paying their loan back on time or not, right? And this sort of creation of these ML models is where the biggest value creation happens. And that's a black box for most companies because they just don't have the data to go create these models.
I'll just bring in a more real life example to what Hari, presented magnificently. Like we all use our smartphone keyboards, right? So when you're typing something, and in India we are traditionally, like, we don't type in one language. We will typically mix English with our mother tongue, and if you see, like, the auto complete, in your keyboards in the smartphones, it's pretty good, even like when you are sort of mixing languages within a single sentence. I mean, as such, there is no such language, let's say, for example, Hindi and English, that people start calling it English, but there is no grammar that supports English. But I as a user are typing it. So whenever I type everything, all the data over a period of time, that is used to build the model that can now predict my version of English, because your version of English may be different. So this, if in the absence of that data, which is my usage over an extended period of time, there's no way model can learn what is my usage of this sort of derived language. So this is this is what we feel all the time, and a lot of us actually don't type as much thanks to these keywords. So a modeler who do not have access to this data of mine, there's no way they can predict my style of writing. So just giving a live example, we are already living this life filled with ML models. We sometimes don't realize them because they're so much embedded in our lives seamlessly.
Oh, absolutely. Beautiful example there. So now we've talked about how data is critical to creating these ML models, and they are highly valuable. But where is data today, right? In India, if you think about India being such a large country of 1.4 billion plus people, what are these latent data sets, and what are the challenges in unlocking these data sets? Obviously, on one end of this, so we kind of came up with this way to represent this, right? On the top end, you have the citizens of the nation, which are really liking the sort of services like ChatGPT and these personal assistants, and are consuming more of these digital services. But on one end, also starting to be more worried about where is my data going. For instance, a lot of companies are starting to say that they don't want to use these OpenAI models because even the prompt data that you are keying in is actually giving away privacy about how you're thinking or what is like potentially a business secret. On the left bottom corner, we have enterprises which are typically small and medium sized companies that have brilliant ideas, want to build great services and products that could potentially even go and compete with like the big techs, but they do not have this data to create these magical products and experiences. And even if, for them to actually go build these data sharing with other companies that have this data, it's a ton of work and a lot of legal hurdles to cross, which they honestly don't have the resources to go do that. This is kind of where the big tech companies excel at, right? They excel at having the data from many services that they have given out for free, but then they're able to also build. They have the technology prowess to and the business ability to enter new markets and build new products that leverage the data from their existing user base, but build great new use cases and products. So on the other hand, we have large data providers, for instance, who want and may want to share data. This is the likes of your IRCTC, the biggest corpus of travel data potentially in India and anywhere in the world. But these sort of organizations, they need both technical as well as market help to unlock the value from their data. Potentially, in many cases, they want other enterprises to come and use this data, and they are unable to unlock this value oftentimes themselves, just like how the unlike how the big tech companies can do it.
Yeah, this is like the crux, or the central slide for our narration, actually. And there are a couple of things that I will bring here. We did talk about the importance of data to build these ML models. There are two things we should remember, like, because we are talking about a sort of enterprises in India. So for them to build effective models, they need data from India. A lot of data that is being used by many of these models that are coming out. It is web data, which is public to everyone. But to create models which are relevant to specific needs, you need that in context data, so to speak, right? and our sensibilities and other things being different, if we sort of try to train a model on web data, which is largely Western centric, the outcomes will not be as great as one would expect. So that is something that we have to remember. So it is really like there's a ton of data that is logged, as we'll talk about it in the next few slides, and it is critical to create models which are relevant to us, which serve Indian needs, and which enable our enterprises to compete with the best in the world.
That's a beautiful point. And one thing to add to that is that while a lot of value has already been unlocked from public data sets, these data sets that are local to India are actually private data sets that have not been unlocked. Therefore, it's not only something that we need to do, but it actually can become a compelling business advantage and competitive advantage because nobody else has this data set. So we are sitting on a gold mine that is waiting to be unlocked. So what are the challenges from the point of view of somebody who's sharing this data, right? Of course, they are worried about privacy and they want that the privacy of their customer to be preserved at all times. The models that they may also be building, they want to make sure that that model does not leak in the hands of a competitor. So privacy is of top concern for somebody who's thinking about data sharing. They want to have complete control of this data sharing and usage at all times. Like for instance, let's say they realize that some data was not kosher to share. They want to be able to immediately pull that access back and gain control back of the data set in an instant. And they also want protection against liability, right? Let's say they did all the hard work required to anonymize or to protect the privacy of this information, but they due to some data sharing mishap, the data actually leaks. They want that liability that comes from it to be limited or protected, right? So the without incurring the high legal costs in order to get that outcome. Unless we solve these challenges, it will be impossible to truly unlock the value from these data sets. Now, let's contextualize this to maybe an example of a medical data, right? Which is again a high value data set. And it's a type of data that India has no dearth for. We have a 1.4 billion people, and our ability to find the right sort of disease information is actually significantly higher from. And where is this data? This data is sitting in test labs, say RT-PCR data that is coming from test labs. If you're talking about a COVID situation, COVID generating this data. State war rooms that are set up to look at specific spikes in COVID cases probably generate a ton of data as well about high frequency of this disease spreading. And that sort of data would be super interesting to somebody like a medical researcher in order to find and build a disease surveillance model or a diagnostic model which can detect the disease and can be applied where in a new setup where the disease is even just starting to happen. This sort of a model can actually help flag that case and help us kind of go and prevent the problem from happening, right? So medical data is a great example where a lot of these data sets are private. It's highly sensitive data. Therefore, all of the concerns we talked about in terms of data sharing apply, squarely to a medical data, but the value that can be unlocked is significantly high. Gaurav, anything you would like to add here?
Yeah, this is is something which is very close to my heart, because in country like India, given our diversity, there are a lot of diseases which still do not have a cure, or we don't even understand them well, because largely our medical education is again Western centric. So a lot of times SOPs, our treatments are not exactly customized to our needs. And it is, so one is like, we probably do a suboptimal job at treating our patients. Second is there are diseases which are unknown, because they are very sort of centric to India, right? I mean, given our diversity and our different lifestyle and our history, DNA, everything, right? So it is not just about sort of creating a system which is enabling our entrepreneurs. This is literally a lifeline of people, many of us around us, right, who suffer from these diseases. In fact, like, there's something close to my heart, because like I have a friend who has a 2.5-year-old daughter who's actually currently suffering from something that he doesn't know. He lives in Bangalore, so there's no dearth of expertise. I mean, just to highlight it further, her platelet count is very low, and they can't tell them why it is so. And kid is as such okay, doing okay, but something is wrong. And just imagine if if we had models that could, it's unlikely that she's the first kid who has this, right? So chances are, in a diverse country, there would have been thousands of such cases, probably, which were detected or diagnosed much later, if we had access in our models, which can sort of distill all this information in a very efficient, effective manner. Maybe we can save or improve lives of so many of kids around us, or everyone around us. So this is goes beyond just enabling our economy, but literally something that we owe it to ourselves in some way.
Yeah, no, that is a very powerful example, right? That where we are able to, we are sitting on this data set that is a gold mine that can unlock economic value, but more importantly, it can actually improve the lives of our own children, which we are, which we haven't like capitalized on. So let's just dive into why is this a frozen data market and why it has not been unfrozen and what we are going to do about it, right? So to further this example, there is a medical and drug research company that has a desire to innovate on treatments and drugs, motivated to offer really personalized medical services. They are open to sharing a part of their revenue, right, in exchange for the data access that like a large data training provider can give them. Who are these providers? Would be hospitals, diagnostic providers, national level health organizations that are collecting this data from various other organizations that they're managing. But the problem is that these data providers have a limited monetary upside and a huge downside that could come from potential leak and misuse of this data. It's not that every medical drug researcher that is getting access to their data will uh, leak that information, but as they do it, if there is some leak of the information that happens, the risk of loss and the risk of litigations or reputation loss that can happen to them creates an asymmetric benefits to risk for this TDP, that any amount of money that you can actually give them from this TDC may not compensate for that potential loss, right? Therefore, for the fear of this loss, these sort of data sharing has not at all happened in India, which is a sad state of affairs. Now, if you think about a country like US, where there exists a vibrant data market, this is not the case. They have been able to successfully unlock these data sets because of the legal enforcement of these private data contracts, which is possible. If in case a training data consumer that received this data fails to hold their end of the bargain and they are unable to keep the secrecy and privacy of this data, such a use case can be immediately brought to a court of law, and not just punitive damages could be delivered to the training data provider. Therefore, that trust in that legal system enables for this sort of a data sharing to happen there. Now, Gaurav, would love to get your thoughts here, right?
So, we all know Indian legal system here, right? So I can promise you whatever you want, but how do you make sure that I keep that promise? It's as simple as that, right? I mean, if you remember, like in India, COD came into being. I mean, e-commerce was not successful that till cash on delivery as an innovation came into being. In fact, that was like one of the first innovations that Flipkart did, and that helped them do well. So if we live in a country where we are a low trust society in some way, our courts don't function as effectively as they should. Far from it, in fact. So such kind of private contracts, whether data or otherwise, they they are futile basically, right? In this fast moving world, fast moving digital world, especially, right? So while some people believe that this works in US and why can't we use it, but exactly the point, like data, like we can't use, as we were talking about the health data, like those models don't work here. Even these contractual models don't work in India. We are a different country with very different systems in place. So it is important to understand the criticality of why we can't export ways of doing such things from the West. Back to you, Hari.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think that's a great comparison to draw there. And and it's absolutely true that the legal enforcement which works in other countries does not work in India, but does not also work in many other countries just like us. right? And therefore, so in any country where the tort law provisions don't apply to rendering these punitive damages, this sort of a legal system and purely depending on the contracts to actually enforce that is a futile attempt, like you're saying. So India is different, and and the one thing that India does not have a dearth for is the innovation, right? So we also have an innovative approach to how data sharing can happen in such a context, just like the cash on delivery, right? This is our innovation here is a techno-legal approach where there is a legal provision which, with thanks to the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which is a landmark bill that actually was passed earlier this year and was signed into law by our honorable president. Now we have the legal air cover for implementing something like DEPA at scale, and the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill is constructed on these adepts and organs principles, which we will see in the next screen what that is all about. And the DEPA bill reflects that from a technical standpoint, and by simplifying the legal enforceability, by having a technology system in place where you cannot go wrong if you implement DEPA very well, right? And so it implements some of those organs and adepts principles that are laid out in this DPDP bill. So we're going to take some time into looking at what that essentially means. So going back to our previous story, that it was, the whole ML inference and the modeling phase, the inference phase is incomplete without the modeling phase. And let's see how we are going to unlock this black box that ML modeling is for organizations of all types and sizes in India. So that is going to be through this system called CCR. And there are three pillars to this, the data collaboration thinking that we have been working on and developing both technology and the legal structure for. First of that is differential privacy. Second is confidential computing, and the third is electronic contracts. Now, I'm gonna turn to you, Gaurav, our resident expert in differential privacy. Just throw some light on what is differential privacy and how is it going to help solve this problem?
Yeah, so we have been talking about a lot of data being needed to train these models. We also know these models are very large. So a side effect of these models being very large is that they have a lot of capacity to literally memorize all the training data. So what is happening here is, like, as you see, right, in the flow chart that Hari showed, the sort of the data from the data provider goes to CCR, the confidential clean room, and the model from the modeler or the training data consumer also goes to the clean room. So as such, the data never gets to the premises of the data consumer. So that sounds like, yeah, it must be safe. You call it clean room, it must be clean, right? I mean, that's why you call it clean room. But the problem is, these models that get trained, they can potentially memorize a whole lot of information from the training data that the TDP was a custodian of that data, so they were supposed to maintain the privacy and the secrecy of that data. But technologically, it is very likely that these very large models, when trained on data, they memorize quite a bit of it. So to counter that, what we use here is something called as differential privacy. It's a fairly new concept from mathematics. I mean, it's new in the sense it's only like less than 20 years old, I mean, compared to most things that we study in mathematics. So it gives you a mathematical paradigm to understand what do we mean by privacy, right? So it gives you very clear bounds on whether a model has memorized more than what you would have wanted it to. Obviously, the model will memorize the patterns. Otherwise, what's the point, right? I mean, it is looking at the training data. If it doesn't learn anything, it's practically a futile exercise. So obviously, it will learn something, but it should learn in terms of aggregates and not in terms of individual data points, which belongs to individuals. So what differential privacy does is it gives you that mathematical guarantee, and not just you trust me that I'm saying this, mathematical guarantee that whatever the system is designed to allow, the model cannot do anything more than that. So which guarantees the privacy will be maintained. The second part in this is confidential computing. Now, as a modeler, I would want, like, this is my IP. I'm in this business. Suppose I'm a startup guy. This is my core IP. I mean, if someone steals it, I mean, my sort of advantage over others will be gone. So all this confidential clean room, the confidential part, in fact, comes from that this happens on a confidential computing environment. What it essentially means is even the host environment, like who owns the hardware, let's say, and they have no access to the data or the code that is being run on that environment. So that's beautiful, because now all this happens somewhere. It takes away the burden of where it is happening. Imagine it is happening on a virtual cloud machine, and as soon as the processing is done, all sort of requirements which are validated automatically are fulfilled. The machine can just go away. The model comes out of the CCR, and the machine is ephemeral. It ceases to exist. And no IP is leaked, no data privacy is leaked. So that's beautiful. The third part is electronic contracts. Like we talked about the flow of money and flow of people. I mean, all this will be again a very cumbersome exercise if we had to go through physical paperwork to actually get into these contexts, to make sure that we adhere to the technical requirements and everything. So all this has to be done electronically, thanks to the advancement in the field of electronic contracts, that literally, like we do UPI from our phone sitting here, all this in a similar fashion can be done without any physical signature or any physical movement of people as such. Back to you, Hari.
Beautiful, beautiful. So what this is great, right? So what you're telling us is that there is we are the DPI for AI in India is bringing together these three sort of state of the art in each of their individual areas. Differential privacy, essentially state of the art in terms of privacy technology that kind of without injecting any noise or without losing any kind of precision in the data set, allows for that raw data set to be available for training, but guarantees that no privacy is leaked. Confidential computing, which is kind of again the state of the art from a compute infrastructure standpoint, allows that nobody can peek into your information, and therefore the model that you have and the data is actually safe with these ephemeral containers where the training can happen and everything can go away, which now means that this infrastructure can exist anywhere, right? In India, like you may not have companies that are able to put together these sort of large infrastructures, and you might have to rely on maybe cloud infrastructure in some cases. So this can happen in the cloud as well, and it is perfectly safe. And the final thing is that these electronic contracts make this, like, takes the legal hassle away and creates a very transparent way to kind of create these models and create these contracts whereby you have the if this is a sensitive data set and like the regulator wants to be able to kind of enforce some of these auditability, that is all transparent in the way these electronic contracts behave, therefore giving you an entire tech stack for building AI models, ML
Exactly. And
models.
I'll just add another point, like the ease of using it. That's DPA is always about ease, whether it is Aadhaar or UPI or Digi Yatra. The ease is so much that this sometimes makes sound complex, and the reason is where it is a bit complex, right? But as long as you adhere to whatever your contractual obligations are written here, both TDC and TDP are safe. Basically, they don't have to worry about what is literally written in the DPDP bill, or how do I make sure I understand that legalese, and how do I make sure I'm not infringing on someone's privacy. So all that is taken care of. That's the beauty of this. And like other DPIs, it is very easy to use. It doesn't get you into like uh, any kind of trouble, as long as you are following what you are supposed to.
Oh, excellent. So let's quickly see who are the stakeholders in this data marketplace, right? So you have the two primary stakeholders are the TDP and the TDC. The TDP is the data provider, and they have the data sets that they're making available and unlocking. Primarily, these are private data sets that are getting unlocked now for TDCs, the training data consumers, who are now able to bring their models and train their model on these data sets inside this secure enclave called a CCR. There is a self-regulated organization which we are actively in the process of bringing to life, which will be a non-profit body, and it will oversee this entire playground, define the standards, lay down the ground rules, just like how we have Sahamati, which is the SRO for private personal data sharing. There will be a SRO that actually is going to manage this playground. And finally, you will have technology service providers and discovery agents who are kind of very important parts of this stakeholders of this playground as well, because oftentimes, like we talked about, the big tech companies have their tech teams who are able to do a lot of these data ML model training and setting up these complex infrastructures. But because we want to unlock value for organizations of all sizes, we might also need TSPs and discovery agents who are able to come and make the connection between the TDP and the TDC, both from a data set standpoint as well as from a tech standpoint, the tech stack they actually are able to bring in and bring this entire marketplace to life. So those are the four primary stakeholders. As you are watching this open house, we would love to hear from you in terms of which of these three camps that you actually would fall into, and would love to support you through your journey of kind of adopting this DPI for AI. So now we're getting to some interesting part of the conversation that we wanted to have, right? And wanted to look at what is the timeline of some of these DPI to bring to life in India, and we look at some interesting comparisons, right? So let's just look at DEPA itself and the timeline of the techno-legal regulation for data sharing. So we started off with the DEPA launch with account aggregator. I think it was 2016, 2017, sometime in that time range. Then you kind of have AI, the applicants for the AA system in 2018. The actual self SRO was launched. Sahamati was launched in 2019. And then in 2020, we really had a host of certified FIUs, FIPs, and account aggregators with over 30 TSPs going live by 2021. And that's kind of the arc for account aggregator, and that's still continuing to grow, right? But if you get into the arc for DEPA for model training, we kind of started with a lot of the effort. In 2022 is where that effort significantly gained traction, and in 2023 now, after the digital personal data protection bill is signed, we are kind of launching these open houses towards the end of 23. Where we see us going from here is that we see that in 24 we'll have several use cases getting unlocked for modeling with aggregate data sets that are coming live into these sandboxes, and the playground being really active with a variety of TDPs, TDCs, and technology providers, discovery agents, along with an SRO. And going forward, we see like a purpose limitation and many other things that are actually going to happen. And this DPI for AI, probably, my wish and reality be it, would be the biggest of the DPIs that we have ever launched, right? With a thriving ecosystem of AI and ML model providers in India, right? That's kind of how we see this panning out.
Just a small, thing to observe in the previous chart. That we started this journey for DEPA training way before ChatGPT came into being. So sometimes people, when we show this, people think this is a reaction to ChatGPT. I have been working on this for over 3 years, so clearly ChatGPT is not that old. It's not even a year old as at current time. So we were, and sort of we had a view of how ML is going to progress and how critical it will become. So way before actually this became sort of came to the public domain. Just wanted to mention that because sometimes people think it's just a reaction to ChatGPT, which it is definitely not.
Great point. And in fact, actually, ChatGPT and all this focus that is there on AI today just renders credibility to the thinking that
Exactly.
that this team has had for the last several years, working through unlocking these data sets, right? So if anything, it actually just renders credibility.
Yeah, we should send a
we're on the path here.
We should send a bouquet to OpenAI folks for bringing credibility to our narration. Otherwise, many people would not have heard us with so much concentration.
Absolutely. So now let's compare this to the timeline of other sorts of DPIs that have happened in India, right? So this specifically is UPI. So when it launched between 2016, late 2016 to then, December of 2019 is when this graph ends. And of course, we know that the number of UPI transactions have just steadily climbed since then. This arc probably looks, the slope of this graph probably looks even more like a hockey stick now. But let's just analyze this, right, in terms of how UPI has grown relative to credit or debit card or other sorts of digital payments. And contextualize this to some key events that happened, right? So in 2016, say the infra actually got in place. 2017 August, roughly about a year from then, Google, enters the market with their Taze product for your fast UPI payments. And then, when you kind of get into 2019 post demonetization, and then subsequently, obviously with COVID, the early movers are the ones that actually had a significant advantage and capitalized on that growth that happened in 2020 and beyond, because they entered the market in 2017. They had a product in place, they captured enough initial customers, they were able to keep the bugs out of the system, right? So all that initial teething trouble that you would have, they were able to take care of all of that they capitalized on the market when the growth happened. So it's critical to think of this period between 2016 August to 2017 August, right? That's the golden period that anybody actually has in order to launch the product, go through the teething issues and be ready for this growth. We don't know when this growth will happen, right? It happened for UPI because of demonetization and subsequently, the COVID itself. But from all the signs that are out there, AI is already has had that trigger, right? Like whatever COVID is to digital payments, we are already sitting on that trigger where the acceleration is already there. So if anything, the amount of time that we have here, or any organization has here to kind of jump on this, is very, very small. So what we would say is that the early movers will have a significant advantage. So be part of the wave one of the DPI for AI launch that we're doing. And so that's kind of a little bit
In
of
addition
motivation.
in addition to Hari's pitch, I would just say, what is not mentioned here is, if you are an early adopter, you also get not only the support of amazing volunteers like Hari and myself, but also a lot of love and affection to see you through this journey. There are always teething troubles, but we have tried to remove them as far as we can. But the support you will get in the early days is unmatched, which once this takes off.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, with that, just wanted to just look at the big picture here as well, right? I think we are at a moment right now with AI, just like how we were with respect to this, just the colonization and that British era, where a lot of these countries were colonized for the resources that they produced. Similarly, data is the biggest resource that actually is at the threat of colonization. And for every country to be able to have sovereignty of their own data and sovereignty on the models they consume, right? The opportunity for them to be a maker and not merely a taker of these ML models, which are getting produced, whether we like it or not, using private public data sets by other countries outside of India. We have that opportunity to preempt that digital colonization, if you want to call it that. And we have the opportunity to impact billions of lives here in India, but also beyond, because India has a rich history of building these digital public infrastructures, but donating them to the G20 nations and beyond. Example of that is MOSIP, where we have been able to donate the innovations that happened as Aadhaar, as a MOSIP protocol adopted by close to 100 million customers, users today across various global nations. UPI is having that similar journey as we speak, where globally nations are looking at whether they can adopt something like UPI. I think we have an opportunity here, just like that with data. This DPI, the digital public infrastructure that can come out of India, can also be a huge influence, a huge geopolitical influence, and benefit billions of lives, not just here in India, but outside. With that, I would say there is a link here to DEPA.world, DEPA.world, Please go visit that. All of the information related to this public infrastructure, the API, the actual source code is all available for free for you to check out. And we have volunteers such as Gaurav and I, and many, many more that are willing to just work with you if you're part of this initial wave one rollout. So that kind of brings us to our vision of a vibrant AI economy. The goal is very simple. We want to unfreeze these frozen private data sets, empower data modelers with public infrastructure, public, freely available open source software that can help them build these data marketplaces and bring to life a vibrant AI economy that can light the sky like fireflies, right? And we don't want to see one or two modelers. We want to see hundreds and thousands of modelers who actually can work on specific data sets and build brilliant ML models that can unlock value for themselves and the entire nation.
So the cost of not acting here will be like collapsing of the cycle in some way, right? I mean, only people who have modelers and data and use cases can innovate. It leads to a crazy level of monopolization, both in the sovereign sense and even in the corporate sense. So cost of not acting towards this mission is very, very high. Not just for India, but many countries and many corporates.
Absolutely, very well said. I think the cost of not doing it is just unfathomably high. So where are we in realizing this vision for our data economy? I think, of course, many researchers, just like Gaurav, have spent the last multiple years in research and development, in really ideating on how do we make this the most secure system? How do we make this the most privacy preserving system? And how do we make the most transparent system, right? Confidential computing, differential privacy, and electronic contracts. Bringing these innovations together in a design system and implementing a prototypical system that can be taken to market, all completely open source, hosted in DEPA.world. That's the milestone we just crossed, and we are right now conducting these open houses, socializing this idea, seeking out people to come and give us feedback, and honestly also participate in this wave one so that we can launch the pilot programs. That's where we would want to be late this year, early next year. And then from there, we go to launching this to public markets and adoption at scale. So we are kind of early in this game, seeking out, socializing these proposals and really seeking feedback from you all.
So much, Harry. This was like amazing discussion, and while there is a lot of tech that has enabled this, I think Hari did an amazing job in sort of narrating while keeping a lot of jargons and technical details away, because that's how it is. I mean, who knows how UPA works? Similarly, actually, you don't have to worry about it. That's the beauty of this, and Hari did an amazing job, to explain such a otherwise complex topic in such simple words. Thank you.
And thanks, Gaurav, for making this this new format that we tried out, because I think this simulates somewhat of how our playground conversations are in our meetings and how we kind of bounce off of each other ideas. I think this was a great experience to do it in this fashion, where of course, you with all the technical insight that you have, but also the contrasting examples sometimes that you brought to fore to just explain this fairly complex concept, right? In a very simple way for all of the people that are hopefully watching this open house soon, that it goes live. We invite TDP,
I had fun doing
TDC.
it, and please let us know, for the audiences who see this, give us feedback on if you like this sort of chit chatty format, little unscripted format, more than the more
Mostly unscripted.
manicured version. Mostly, I mean, actually everything was unscripted. In fact, some of the examples I came up with were not there.
Live
It just
today,
made
exactly.
sense.
I was surprised with these great examples that came out today for the first time. But thanks everybody for watching this open house. We loved having you. If you're a TDP, a TDC, or a technology service provider or a discovery agent that would want to be part of this wave one, we would love to talk to you. Like Gaurav said, we have all the time now to handhold you through this process, and let's just come make history with DPI for AI. Thank you.
Thank you.